Margaret is a senior director of corporate strategy at Adobe, working on long-term growth strategy for the business. She has an incredible background being a graduate of Brown and Harvard Business School for her MBA. So she began her career teaching seventh grade math in Oakland Unified for Teach for America, and then moved into consulting at Bain. Some of you who are in business might know of Bain, of course, and actually moved to EdTech with Khan Academy. She also currently serves on the board of a charter school, Making Waves Academy in Richmond, California. So Margaret, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, I'm so excited.
Yes.
So nice to meet you all, and happy to share a bit about me.
Absolutely. So we'd love to maybe if you can tell us a little bit about you, of course, what your job, because you have such an incredible title. And I feel like those titles are but what is it really? What does it mean?
It's a great question. Yeah. So just a little bit of context. I've been at Adobe for 6 years, which is why ArtBound is such an interesting, because it's so focused on creative industries. I am very openly not a creative myself. I am much more a quant person, but I adore working with our creative business, and it's such a fun part of my job. So for many of you, maybe I'll just start with Adobe. A lot of people know Adobe for a few different things. So I'll just overview on what we do, and then I'll give context on what my role is. Adobe has we call them three different clouds. We have what we call the Creative Cloud, which many of you are probably familiar with. So we've got Photoshop, Premiere Pro, Illustrator. We now have Adobe Express, lots of cool stuff happening there. We have Document Cloud, which is actually Adobe Acrobat. So if you open up PDFs, you might have Acrobat Reader if you have to sign things. And then lastly, we have a kind of enterprise software business called Digital Experience, which is more focused on marketing. And so it helps the largest companies in the world actually deliver marketing campaigns, drive their websites, and kind of connect all the creative content that's being created for these businesses and deliver them actually to the audiences, and think about how you personalize and bring the best marketing messages and the creatives to your end user. And so many people don't realize we do all three, but that's a little bit about what we do. So I've been on our corporate strategy team for 6 years. Corporate strategy is a big term. It's a great thing. What do we do? Strategy is also something that I like to say almost every team at Adobe does strategy in some way, shape, or form. What my team focuses on is how do we continue to position Adobe for our long-term growth trajectory, right? We have all of these different products. We've built a portfolio of businesses. We want to make sure we continue to grow. We continue to deliver customer value, whether that's to new customers, whether that's expanding customer value and delivering more to our existing users, and figuring out what do we need to be doing to deliver that? And how do we continue to innovate in how we deliver the best products and services to our customers? And so a big part of my job is just understanding actually all the technology and landscape trends outside of our business. What are other companies doing? What tools are other people using? What are the customer needs that maybe we aren't deeply serving? And trying to create a thesis and try and help drive the business's core strategic decisions against those, right? So a lot of our business is focused on what do we execute in the next 12 months? What products do we need to release? What do we need to market? What do we need to sell? But we get to think at a kind of much bigger level. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, these days we think a lot about AI as one of those trends, and amongst many that we think about how is that going to change what our customers need, what we need to deliver to them, and the opportunity ahead for our company.
So tell us, Margaret, I think, I'm sure people might also wonder, of course, you're talking to us about the role and the objectives of your role, right?
Yep.
What are some tasks that you do on the day-to-day? What's
such a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will tell you now, my day-to-day is in a lot of meetings, but I'll tell you kind of what are the tasks that I'm doing, whether that's in meetings or out of meetings. So the first big thing that me and my team do is we do a ton of what we call problem-solving sessions. So a big part of our job, part of our job is we're trying to predict the future. It's not an easy task. It's actually fully impossible, but we're trying to piece together where do we think this is headed? Can we get signals from the market? Can we understand the technology and start putting together what might be possible with this new technology that's now being available? And so what we're doing is my teams are doing a ton of analysis on, the technology trends, understanding of the landscape, user research, right? What are our customers needing and using and asking for? And so we're doing all of those things. And then we do what we call these problem solving sessions, where we spend a ton of time just brainstorming and whiteboarding and say, okay, well, what does this mean, right? And it's not just about what's an insight, but what's it mean for the company? Like, does this mean we need to invest in new products? Does this mean we need to market in a really different way? Because, now everything is video and we want to speak to our customers in a way that's video first. We also need to empower them to create videos, like what sort of, we spend a lot of time then kind of piecing together and problem solving. And so that's one of my favorite parts about the job is I get to work with my teams on that. The second part of my day and a big part of my job then is convincing all the people and all the different teams around me to listen to what we have to say and kind of convincing stakeholders, right? So like, we think we have good ideas. We think we have an analysis or just, a product idea that maybe, isn't happening within Adobe, but then we've got to go convince all these people that run these large businesses and say, okay, here's why you should care. And so we spend a lot of time influencing, educating, right? Helping them understand where we're coming from, influencing them, and help driving strategic decisions. So that's a big part of my day, is just working with and understanding those stakeholders and trying to anticipate their questions and kind of understand what is going on in their world so we can piece together like our ideas and what's already happening in their organization. So that's a big part of my day. And then I'd say like the last piece is I also spend a lot of time just reading the tech news. It's probably my team's favorite thing, and what we have to do every day is we spend a lot of time spending some time on just like what new product has announced something, like what else is, are we seeing like some interesting new startups, or what are we learning about how companies are using different tools and what's happening in the tech landscape that we can be smart on and can help inform these perspectives. So I'm reading tech news in between meetings. I'm trying to, particularly in today's day and age, when like just this week alone, there were like new AI models that got announced by Anthropic. And so you're like, there's a lot that's changing all the time. So trying to at least stay up to date and then digest that is like also what then I'm spending a chunk of my time on.
I think it's such a cool job that you have, and I think it's interesting that you're saying that you're not creative, because in many ways it feels very creative to me, in terms of like, it's a lot of thinking and kind of brainstorming.
Yes.
And
totally, exactly. There's a lot of analysis that my team gets to do, and then but I get to kind of work through like, what does it mean? And it's and I think the best part about, and I'll just say, like, I work in a purely strategy role.
Yeah.
Not everyone works in a purely strategy role, but strategy is something that every team is responsible for. Whether you're on the studio team, whether you're on the marketing team, whether you're on our communications team, whether you're on our product teams, obviously, like you are responsible. There's like parts of the strategy that you're crafting. And I think not everyone gets to spend all day doing it, but I think it's a really important skill for everyone to build through their careers, because it only gets more important as you get more senior, because more and more, that's what you become responsible for. So figuring out early how to build some of that muscle, I think will be, it can be really valuable, even if it's not your entire day to day.
I love that. It's a great pro tip. So I think I'm asking people to start asking questions, and I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm seeing them start to come through. They're good questions.
I know there's some good questions, but I have one last question to ask you. On my end before I open it up to the chat. Obviously, we're having here a lot of students and fresh grads that are kind of like, how can I get a job at a place like Adobe, right? Like, what are you guys looking for, in terms of like your interns, your juniors, like, because of course I know like it's one of, such a huge company and such an incredible company. And I know you probably have like a vision for like who's coming in, right? Like, do you have a little bit of insight for us on this?
Ooh, great question. I'll speak to my team. But I think there are a couple of things that we look for when we are hiring, particularly at the younger, like more entry level. I think one is we look for people who have quantitative skills and qualitative skills on the research side. So from a business perspective, that's important. Secondly, we look for someone who's starting to build and think through that strategic thinking. So building that strategic logic. And I got some really, really good advice from someone early on in my career who said, I was like, how do you do that? Like, there's no, at least for me, there was no class that like taught me like, here's how to think strategically. But one of the things that helped me get, it's a lot of practice, fun fact. It's like not something you do overnight. It's a ton of practice. But a colleague told me, you got to start practicing early. And the thing that he told me was, look at all these different companies that you guys see every day. It doesn't have to be tech companies, doesn't have to be creative companies. But like, let's say tomorrow Gatorade launches like a new flavor. And like, ask yourself, why did Gatorade launch the new flavor? How do you think they decided that they wanted to launch that new flavor, right? Like that was a strategic decision. And so if you kind of like, just in your day-to-day, you'll pick up on, you know, new things that businesses are doing all the time. And you start building like, okay, what do you think drove them? What was the customer insight, market opportunity that drove them to make that strategic decision? And so that's something we're looking for, people who are starting to build that strategic logic. And, you know, if we ask them, okay, well, what do you think Instagram's going to do next? Like they would kind of say, okay, well, based on what I know about Instagram, like here would be kind of the logic I would say, and how I would predict like what they might do next. And so I think that's like one good tip in terms of how to get practice on that early on. And we're looking for people who are starting to build that strategic logic. The last piece, well, there are two more pieces actually. We look for intellectual curiosity. So I think like just showing that you're interested in a company, interested in the space that they work in, like, you know, want to learn more, you know, you that sort of just showing that intellectual curiosity and that you're a go-getter about learning, at least for our team, is amazing, because all we do all day is learn and like then figure out how to apply it. And so seeing someone who's just actually, you know, engaged on that front is so valuable. And I think that happens at any level, right? It doesn't matter if you're brand new to your career or not. And then the last thing that we look for is what we call executive presence. So someone who our team does present to our C-suite, including our younger team members, probably more than other younger team members across the company. So we're looking for someone who, you know, is calm, collected, can communicate clearly, that we would trust to put in front of an executive. Obviously, we coach and there's lots of opportunities to learn on the job, but someone who has a little bit of that communication style and presence early on also stands out to us when we're looking for talent.
I love that. I think those are great, like just very clear. No, but it's great.
We do a lot of recruiting, and I've helped a lot with recruiting. So it, you know, you do crystallize this when you've been working for this long, and hopefully that's helpful for some of you guys in terms of things to think about and also ways to prepare that maybe you hadn't thought about before.
No, it's great. There's so many great questions. I don't even know where to start, but like I'm looking through the chat. So, well, there's a question that says, "Hi, Margaret, you've reached an impressive position in your career. Can you reel back to when you were a fresh grad, actually yourself, looking for jobs? What was the process like for you, and what type of advice tips do you have for fresh grads who may not have extensive experience in the creative industry yet?" You gave us one earlier, which was exactly, and actually there was somebody who was asking you, like, as a creative, do you recommend us to follow some trends or marketing starting on our own? So I think you had a really great point about that. You kind of already answered that question of like looking out with what's there, thinking about it, but try to remember what
guys, I mean, look, I graduated in 2011, which was just after another financial recession, which was hard. It's hard. It requires a ton of legwork. You really have to constantly feel like you're proving yourself. So I'm not going to say that I have like I know what the perfect line of sight is into it. I'd say, I mean, look, I'm just speaking personally. Everyone speaks to their own story. You know, I ended up doing Teach for America, which was not necessarily originally my plan. I became a math teacher. I'm a math nerd. Like, I just can't help myself. So it fit really well with just what I enjoyed doing. And it was an opportunity for me to learn. And I think maybe the one piece of advice from that would be like, it's okay to take a risk outside of what you think you want to do. Like, I thought I wanted to go, I was studying sustainability. I thought I wanted to go into like environmental engineering and sustainability at businesses. And obviously my path has taken me like in a very different direction. But I think doing something, for me, TFA was one, a well-known program. So I'd say like if you're early on in your career, having a well-known program on your resume, even if it's not what you expected to do, can be really valuable because it's an entity that other people can recognize. But you learn a lot in your first couple of jobs in any way, shape, or form. Like teaching is not what I do now, but I learned a ton of soft skills around how to present, how to handle like tough conversations, all of these things that have been really valuable in my career, even if they weren't like official skills that like, perfectly built into my resume. So I think be open to some slightly different opportunities. Look for kind of known programs that at least then when you want to change, it's a known entity on a resume that people can recognize that it's a skill building opportunity. And just like approach everything with maybe a learning mindset. And not everything is forever. So I taught for 2 years and that was it. And that's okay. And now I found other ways to be involved in education. But maybe those are my kind of initial insights.
It's great. It's great. And I think it's really good to remind everyone that things are not so permanent, actually, and that like you're building out, right? It doesn't have to be extremely linear. And I think your journey kind of shows that, right? Like,
oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm being honest, most people say like, what do you want to be in 5 years? I only really plan my career in 2-year chunks. Like I think about, well, what do I want to learn and develop in the next 2 years? I've never known exactly what I want to be. I still can't tell you what I want to be when I grow up. But I think about, well, what do I want to learn in the next 2 years? Like, and is the place I'm at, or is it somewhere else that I think I can learn that? And so for me, that's been a framework that's been really helpful. Many other people operate differently, but that's helped me kind of navigate more the jungle gym of a career than the perfect career ladder over time.
Actually, I have a question about that exactly, which is, Miles, I saw that you worked as a consultant as Bain early in your career, right? So what made you switch from your path from management consulting to like something that's more tech-based of Adobe?
Yeah. So here's like my advice on how to think about like changing jobs over the course of is learn what you liked and didn't like about about your prior job, and then use that to inform the next job. So for example, I was at teaching. What I really missed when I was a teacher was I really missed working in teams because I was just by myself. I mean, I was surrounded by my students, but I didn't have peers that I was collaborating with in a way that, you experience in college. And I really missed that because that was such a way that I personally learn and develop as an individual. So I learned I missed that. And second thing I learned is that I missed the intellectual rigor, the quant thinking. Like I got okay, let's not say I got good at teaching. I started to figure out teaching. And then I was like, okay, how do I keep pushing myself? And how do I keep learning? And I was missing kind of that intellectual. So when I went out to look at jobs, I was trying to solve for places that were known to have really strong teamwork, dynamics, and collaboration, and where I felt like I could really kind of push myself intellectually on the rigor. And so for me, consulting was like, still didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew they worked in teams. I knew it was going to give me a chance to learn a ton, and then I would sort it out. And then like post consulting, I said, okay, what did I like about that? I really like the strategy part. What did I not like about that? I didn't like, kind of working for different clients all the time. So that's like kind of guided that sort of asking myself those questions has helped guide what I'm trying to solve for over time.
Margaret, thank you so much for already giving us so much insight. And I'm excited for more because I'm seeing even more good questions coming through. So just a little break to tell you a little bit about what we're up to and what we're doing on our end. So ArtBound Initiative basically is a program that was created to help students and fresh grads to break into the creative industries. We know that those fields are very much about relationships. They're not easy to navigate. And so we wanted to create a platform that, was including, coaching and, professional development through an academy that we've created actually, which is like some courses and like live sessions that are all about entering the workforce, how to pitch yourself, how to like build a great resume, how to build an amazing portfolio. Like we're focusing on all of this. We also have guaranteed internship placement if you get selected into our program. We're very hands-on on the support as well. And then we provide access to a network. And that's something that's a lifetime membership, which of course, I'm sure Margaret, being from Brown and Harvard, the power of networks. And that's something that's very important, right? To build out something with alumni. So we have different destinations across the world. We are in the US, in New York, LA, Chicago, in Europe area. We're in London, Berlin. We're also in Australia, in Melbourne, Sydney, and we have a remote program as well for those who might not have the funds to be relocating to other places. We have different industries that we cater to: advertising, marketing, all that space, entertainment and media, fine arts, design, fashion. Those are the industries that we are in. And then we have obviously tons of internships in there. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm just putting it out here. But of course, I encourage you all to go on our website to kind of look through and see if there's the thing that you're interested in there. But you can see tons of opportunities in those areas. So just explaining very briefly about the components. So the Academy is like some courses that you can do on the side of your job, of any job or any full-time university that you're doing. But basically with us, you're going to learn a lot of the pragmatic stuff, how to build your resume, your portfolio, getting, industry professionals like Margaret to come and talk and like to hear their story and to hear their advice. You'll be like paired with recruiters to learn how to do job interviews. We'll talk about the difficulties and the challenges that exist in like starting a career and like entering the workforce and dealing with different company cultures and bosses and all of that. So we'll talk about all of this and you'll learn a lot through it. And at the end, you'll get a certificate as well that you can add on your LinkedIn or your resume. Those are examples of some of our coaches, people who are at Warner Bros. And Vice and Omnicom. So trying to bring in cool people to talk to you all. So that's the first part. The second part is, if you get accepted into the program, you will receive an internship offer. That's our promise to you all. And that's why there's a selection process, of course. So we have about 300 company partners that we work with. The internships typically would range from 3 to 6 months. You can do it also for academic credit, of course, if you are a student. The one thing that we want to be very transparent about is that as much as we wish we could, we are not yet in a place where we can guarantee paid opportunities, okay? Because we're working with a lot of different companies. We have some big ones, but also some boutique ones. And so that's the one thing that you need to be aware if you are going to be applying for the program, is that the internship might be unpaid, right? So something to really factor in terms of financials. The internship could be part-time if you want, so you can have a side job, or it could be full-time. And we have been very lucky because we prepare a lot of our participants. Many of them have converted into full-timers afterwards and getting junior roles. So those are some of examples of big company partners that we've placed with, like CBS and TBWA and Hypebeast and McCann. But we also work with smaller companies that I wanted to show you so you can get a feel, like Atlantic Pictures, like a production company in New York, or Picture North, a production studio in Chicago that does a lot of like the Super Bowl ads and the commercials. Factory PR in LA, for example, that's a PR and ad agency where there's internships and like, a bunch of internships there. Raptor in London, global marketing agency. Studio Aventi, creative agency in Berlin, where you can do some art direction and motion and social. And then Milkman, creative agency in Melbourne. And then finally, a production studio in Sydney, Collider, where you can do like graphic motion production. So just wanted to give you a little bit of like a look and feel of some of those companies that you might not have heard of, but that are also, pretty cool. So very briefly to finish up, you will receive, support throughout the entire program through our virtual coordinators that are going to help you through everything. And that's going to be, somebody that you'll definitely need some support to go through the academy, like finding the internship, because we're very hands-on on that. And then if you relocate, you'll also have support of an in-city coordinator that's going to be there to be your emergency point of contact. It's going to do meetups so you can navigate the local scene, especially if you are, for example, from Singapore going to New York, right? It might help to have like a crew there and to meet people. And then the final thing about the program is our community. And that's, of course, the biggest thing for me. That's the long-term game. So you're having access to our networking platform and events. This is a lifetime membership. You will have monthly meetups. We send, jobs and internship lists every month. We send out opportunities when our partners are recruiting for juniors. And then we're doing several insider talks, just like we're doing now, and workshops, so that you can keep building up relationships and get jobs past your internships, right? So we have an application process, of course. Our upcoming application deadline, we're recruiting for summer already, just so you know. Come in early, right? Margaret, I don't know when you all are recruiting for summer for the internships, but it's starting early.
It starts early.
It always is, right? So we have our upcoming deadline, which is November 10, which I recommend. It's an early deadline for our summer program. We will be also doing another deadline in December 10, but we are on a rolling admissions basis. So once we don't have spots anymore, we don't have spots anymore. So I would recommend to apply early. In order to apply, you'll need to fill out an application form. You'll have an interview with our admissions team, and then we'll let you know if we're able to move forward with your application to the program. And then, of course, you can make your decision whether you want to join or not. So I encourage you all, if that's of interest to you, to check out our website. You'll find more information about our program tuition. We have different tuitions based on where you're going, what you're doing, if you're doing something virtual or locally. For example, if you're in the US and you want to stay in the US, or if you want to go internationally, there's different costs as well, and budgets that you need to put together. We have also a lot of information about scholarships and just more information about all the internships that we offer, right? So check out our website. You have here a form. I'm just going to leave a little QR code. If you want to check if you're eligible, because that would be the first step, right? Check if you are eligible to our program. Some majors are eligible, depending on when you've graduated, if you want to go places. So you can grab this QR code to see if you're able to join the program. So that's it. I wanted to just introduce what we're doing here, of course, so that you understand the context of what's happening here. And I want to go back now to all the great questions. And of course, if you have questions as well about the program, I'm happy to answer them if we do have the time. So let's go a little bit, on going back on some of those really fantastic questions. Actually, somebody was asking, since we're on the topic of internships.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of what an internship at Adobe entails? Maybe as a creative, like, do you know if there's multiple departments? Like, is there tons of
great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I believe, don't quote me on this. I know that Adobe has internships across many departments. Our internships is not just limited to engineering or anything like that. So we definitely have had interns all across our different teams, which is super fun. It's something that we've always had a program around. And I think part of the really fun part, so one takeaway is at big companies, there are tons of internships. Go poke around and see what you can find. There are all sorts of different departments that are looking for internships. The second thing is, one of the really fun parts about joining a bigger company like Adobe when you are an intern is you also get to meet all of these other types of interns and kind of understand all these cross-disciplinary projects and what they're working on and build the network. I know at Adobe, we really prioritize the intern experience. So when you come, you get an intern summit where you get to know all of these different other interns. You get to meet and hear from a few of the different leaders at the company as an opportunity to just get to know the company. And then you work on an internship project. And so often that's kind of defined as they're hiring, or maybe defined right as they're joining. And usually you get a chance to both deliver something independently, but also see how that works with the broader organization, right? And so it's, we always say it's like a two-way street. You know, you are deciding if you like Adobe, and we're deciding if we like you. And we have then full-time roles that sometimes our interns are able to, not all of our interns, but sometimes our interns can come into. And so part of it is about, you know, doing great work on your project, but then also getting to know how Adobe and just the company works, right? How does a project, an independent project, like who are the stakeholders you have to work with? What are the different kind of processes that these things have to go through at a company like this? So that's sort of how I think about internships. But yes, and I'm sure, I don't know when our internship, actually, I don't know when our internship program starts. But check online. We have interns. Go check it out. If they're not there now, I'm sure they will pop up at some point. So, you know, feel free to keep checking.
A big thing is for you all, if you are interested in Adobe, and just as a pro tip for everybody, like all those companies that you're interested in, like just go and start stalking them a little bit, right? Like follow them on LinkedIn, like, you know, go on their newsletters if they have one, right?
Oh,
But
yeah,
just start getting those updates, right? Because otherwise,
totally.
you gotta go find
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will hear this in other forums too, like figure out if you have connections with anyone that works there who can, one, give you a little bit of context, two, also help refer you to programs. You know, is there an alum at your college? So like go on LinkedIn and find alums, talk to them, demonstrate interest. They also can then, you know, flag things to recruiters internally. And again, a lot of looking for interns is like, how do you show up and show that you're interested and you want to learn and you want to be a part of the company for the summer? And so, you know, there are lots of different ways to do that, even just leading into submitting your resume. So be proactive. It's well worth it. Sometimes people don't respond, and that is okay. It's like, take your shot.
Totally. Nothing to
And
lose.
alums are usually like, there's alums that are really happy to talk about their experiences, how to think about applying, what different types of jobs are, because also these jobs are kind of sometimes very nebulous role titles like mine, like what does that really mean? And so there's a lot of people who'll be willing to help you understand and then also help point you in the right direction.
Absolutely. I love that. No, and you know, power of network, right? So that's a real
Oh
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
So I had a great question from Joelle. There's so many, and I really hope that I'll get to all of you all, you know, just trying to get there. What qualities do you think make someone successful in leadership positions at company like Adobe, particularly within industries?
Oh my gosh, such a good question.
I know there's so
It's
many.
interesting because, I mean, maybe like, I think at Adobe, there are a lot of different styles of leaders. And it's actually one of the reasons why I love working here. There's not just one type of leader. Obviously, like we have a number of female leaders here, which is super important to me, folks to look up to. So you've got lots of different styles, but maybe I'll tell you a little bit about like what some of the commonalities or things that have stood out to me. I think one is a big piece is relationship building. Adobe in particular is a very relationship oriented company, but I think, you know, the ability to build strong relationships where people trust you, you can really, they look and they seek out your opinion. You know, when you get to a point where you're giving advice and people are seeking out your opinion and say, oh, I like, let me chat with this person. I'd really love what they think. I think that is a really good sign of relationship building and being able to build a number of relationships, because most of us, even if we manage people like I do, spend most of your time influencing. Like that's a huge amount of what you do. And so I think relationship building is a really, really critical part of that. I think another thing is as a leader being able to set a vision and like help guide your team, you know, create a clear path for your team. I think there's a lot of leaders at Adobe who do that in very different forms, but you know, when you're in the day-to-day grind, you want to kind of know what you're working towards and what you're trying to achieve and how your work fits into that. And I think great leaders can do that. And I try to do that in my projects. So my teams get excited about the impact they're going to have and understand how what they're doing in a day-to-day world kind of contributes to that. And then I think, you know, just, I don't know, I try to lead with a lot of empathy, like, and that probably contributes to a lot of the relationship building, like lead with empathy for your customers and the communities that you're working for and to serve, and empathy with those that you actually work with day to day. And so I think that's Those are probably some of the things that stand out.
Yep.
But yeah, those
Love
things
that.
are important.
Oh, it's really cool to, and it's cool to hear about what's important in leadership, because that tells a lot about the culture of a company too, right? So, so I have a question from Jocelyn, who's saying, you mentioned how important research is, right, as a skill.
Ah,
Your platforms that you recommend for researching
ooh,
stakeholders in your field, like anything that, I don't know,
oh my
any
gosh,
pro tips.
this is a great question. Um, I'm just like addicted to news articles. Like I will tell you like the thing that I do. So there's two things. How do you consume information and then actively researching something net new? So maybe I'll touch on both. I consume a ton of information. I use an app called Feedly where it aggregates a bunch of different news sources into one feed, which I find really helpful because there's a bunch of different places that publish tech articles, including folks that write more like opinion and editorial kind of points of view pieces and blogs. And so I use a bunch of those. I use Feedly to kind of layer all those in so I can see the headlines and kind of then be able to click into that. So that's one way that I like just try to organize all the information that I consume. And you can make like, I have like a tech tab and then I have like a world news tab. You have different ways to organize it. So that's been a lifesaver for me in terms of how I consume information. From a researching perspective, I would just say like I spend a lot of time on Google. There's just it is what it is. I think there's a lot of ways to be scrappy about what you're trying to understand. Like, like we get asked questions about, hey, is this trend growing? And like usually there's not perfect data out in the world. No one's done a perfect study on is X thing growing. But it's like, okay, can I figure out like how many people are using this thing? Or can I figure out how many employees a new company has? Like, what can I do that can help me kind of get some signals on that? And that you can find online. You can find things on LinkedIn. You can find things on like online. You can fun fact, like Facebook, I think Twitter as well, X now, LinkedIn, all have what they call ad transparency platforms. So you can actually see what ads people are running at any given time. Obviously not how much they spend on it, but you can see like what campaigns people are running, because obviously like we only get what that shows up in our feed. So
Right.
you can like just find out a lot of information by using some of these different portals where information is just housed in different forms. So I think get scrappy. I wish I had a better answer,
Oh, it's a
but
great answer.
you learn these tips and tricks over time. But I think Googling, getting scrappy, like you can learn a bunch of, you guys know this, like Reddit, there's like places where a lot of information is, and kind of getting scrappy and trying to find things and not just stopping when you're like, oh, I Googled like, is this trend growing? And nothing perfect came up. I think it's usually about pushing a little bit beyond that and trying to say, okay, well, how can I find something that maybe validates or disvalidates that? So that's at least how I think about research in my world.
I love that. I love that. I think it's a great, get your hands dirty.
Oh yeah, like I still do it, guys. I'm like I've worked my way up and I'm still in the scrappy mode. I don't know that ever goes away.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good skill to build early.
Good thing
And
to know.
hopefully you enjoy doing it. I do. So
Yeah. So I have a couple questions here, like how flexible is Adobe in terms of its team background? Like for example, can a person with a business background transition to a creative branch and vice versa?
ooh.
A question about, I'm just going to loop them together. Also a question about like, entering, you might not know, but is there any GPA requirements, for example, to be entering
Ooh.
Adobe?
I wouldn't know, but I like Adobe definitely has this stuff posted online. So dig around. Like
Yeah.
I'd say a lot of the big companies like try to make this as publicly available
Yeah.
particularly in terms of like their bigger internship program. So I don't know on the GPA. The team background, that's a really interesting one. I'd say like I think we're definitely for the most part probably open. I don't know for particular teams. We definitely have a history of people inside Adobe also moving roles once they get here. So they started in this team and then they moved over to this team. And so I think there's lots of opportunities. There's a recognition that people come from different backgrounds, but that doesn't mean that their careers don't go in different ways. And you have opportunities to build skills in different areas. So it probably depends on the role. If there's like hard and fast rules, I'm not sure if we have any hard and fast rules, but generally, I think we are open to people who are looking to evolve their skills. I think what's most important in those situations is helping people understand how your historical skills will help you in your next role. So like, hey, if I'm from a business background, I want to look, I am really good at understanding, and like maybe I'll speak to the trends part, what trends are working, and I can apply that to creative, and I can bring that knowledge to a creative team and to what I can do in my day-to-day. Or as a business background, I have a lot of practice in presenting, and that's a skill that's still really valuable as a creative in a business context. So like think about how you translate those. You help people understand why you would be still a good fit for this different role. But I think there's generally we see a lot of people here who have, you know, come from different, I mean, I came from teaching and here I am. Like there's lots of that across Adobe.
And I think it's pretty valued for a company like Adobe. Like I think they probably value that a lot, like different backgrounds coming through and transfer, you know, and being versatile and
yeah.
you know,
and look, like there's probably like, you know, again, talk to another alum. If you find someone, if you have a question about a job role, like use LinkedIn. If you're like, hey, I'm interested in this team, ping, like try to figure out who runs that team through LinkedIn and like send them a note, be like, hey, here's my background. Like, do you think I could be a good fit? Like also like open up like a conversation with someone about that. Or maybe there's a recruiter at your school who you can reach out to and you can say, hey, I really want to learn more. Like create a conversation around that. And you know, that gives you an opportunity to also pitch versus just, you know, submitting your resume. So I think that's would be my advice. I'm not sure exactly our policies, but like, you know, create a conversation around that. And I think that'll help people understand where you're coming from and where you want to go.
Yeah. And I think you answered actually a question that was just about to ask you, which is like some opinions on how to find jobs and things like that. But there was a question from Christina who was asking about the fact that you graduated in 2011 when you were mentioning after a big recession. What's your opinion on the job market then versus now? Has anything changed for the better?
Has anything changed? What was the last part, Laura?
Has anything changed for the better or the worse, basically?
Ooh.
What's your opinion?
So you know, I don't know the exact state of the market, so it's hard for me to compare exactly. I would say, has anything changed for the better or the worse? I think from an internship perspective, like I do think COVID and like the openness to remote work in different ways, definitely I would hope is benefiting internships in different ways, shapes, and forms. So I think that part is good. I know at least for us, we even just do our whole interview process remotely, which before it was like we had to visit certain schools and it felt like it was more limited. And now, you know, anyone can do an interview from anywhere. And so I think there's benefits in that from just the recruiting perspective, but also I don't know about where Adobe stands exactly on this, but for some other companies, like they have remote interns. So again, it doesn't require that you are in a certain place. You may have access to opportunities that didn't exist before. So I think that's hopefully one thing that has changed. If I think about where we were at in 2011 versus now, but I can't speak to like kind of how the broader, I mean, you guys are feeling it. I think, look, the job market, even in good years, it's hard when you graduate. It's really, really hard. And so there's no avoiding that regardless. So I'd say like, just keep pushing through. Again, my other piece of advice on like, keep yourself open to maybe taking on different things that you weren't considering before. And there are going to be things that you learn from along that journey as well.
Absolutely love that. And you know, for the sake of time, I think we'll probably have to wrap up. There was so many great questions, you all, and I absolutely love it that I wasn't able to get to all of them. But I really highly encourage you, like everybody here on this chat seems very curious about it. I do highly encourage you all to like really start following closely Adobe, and like if you are interested in that sector, to really just like do some digging and do some research. I've learned a lot from you, Margaret, today, in terms of like, I loved your advice and I want to repeat it about like, if you want to start a career or if you're interested in strategy, to start questioning yourself as to why this brand is doing this and launching this product, or like, I think that's a great method. And I never thought of, building.
Yeah, it's like an easy thing. And I'm sure, by the way, that could translate into creative fields too. Like what, why do you think this? And you guys study this too, so maybe you do more of that. But like, making like little mini case studies of things that you guys see in your day to day, and kind of putting yourself in the leader's shoes. Why did you do that? Why do you think that made a decision? Do you agree or do you not agree? Which is also good to have a point of view. So getting practice.
It is. Love that. Thank you, everybody. And again, sorry for not, going through all your questions. I tried as much as I could, but it was like so many great ones. We appreciate you for, being there for an hour. We're still 60 here on this call, so it's quite incredible.
I know.
Margaret, you're awesome. Thank you so much for being so real with us.
Thank you, guys. Good luck with everything.
Yes.
Hope this was helpful.
Yes,
all right.
all the advice that we needed. Bye, everybody.
Bye, all.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye-bye.